The wagon wheels kicked up dust on the long road to Trinity, Kansas, and Nora Patterson felt every one of her 38 years in the ache of her bones as the town finally came into view through the shimmering heat of August 1879. She had traveled from St. Louis with nothing but 2 trunks of belongings and a letter of introduction to the schoolteacher's position, only to arrive and find the school board had already given the job to someone else. A younger woman, they said, someone more suitable for the frontier children who needed energy and vigor. The chairman had barely looked at her when he delivered the news, his eyes sliding away from her face as though her age was something shameful to witness. Now she sat in the dusty office of the Mercantile, her last coins counted out on the scarred wooden counter, trying to figure out how she would survive the next week. The proprietor, a kindly woman named Mrs. Henderson, had offered her a room above the store for a reduced rate, but Nora knew charity when she saw it, and the thought of accepting handouts made her stomach clench. There might be work at the Peterson ranch, Mrs. Henderson said gently, restocking shelves behind the counter. Caleb Peterson came through yesterday looking for someone to help manage his household. His sister went back east to care for their ailing mother, and he needs someone who can cook, keep house, and help with the bookkeeping. It is not teaching, but it is honest work. Nora straightened her spine, smoothing down the gray traveling dress that suddenly felt too warm in the stuffy store. I can do all those things. Where would I find Mr. Peterson? His ranch is about 5 miles west of town. Big spread, does well with cattle. He is a good man, fair and decent. Lost his wife some years back. Mrs. Henderson paused, studying Nora with shrewd eyes. He might appreciate someone with some life experience rather than a flighty girl. The hope that sparked in Nora's chest felt fragile as a bird's egg, but she clung to it anyway. She had come too far to turn back now, had left too much behind in St. Louis. The memories of her late husband, gone these past 3 years, and the judgmental stares of his family who thought she should remain a grieving widow forever, content to fade into the background of other people's lives. The ride out to the Peterson ranch cost her $2 precious, but the driver of the hired wagon was talkative and pointed out landmarks along the way. The landscape opened up into rolling prairie, golden grass rippling like an ocean under the endless blue sky. Cattle dotted the hillsides, and in the distance, Nora could see the dark line of trees that marked a creek. The ranch house came into view gradually, a solid structure of wood and stone that spoke of permanence and care. Outbuildings surrounded it, a large barn, several corrals, and what looked like a bunkhouse for ranch hands. A man emerged from the barn as the wagon approached, wiping his hands on his pants. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair threaded with silver at the temples and a face weathered by sun and wind. Nora judged him to be in his early 40s, with the kind of solid presence that came from years of hard work and responsibility. His eyes, a striking gray blue, watched the wagon with curiosity rather than suspicion. "Mr. Peterson," Nora called out as the wagon came to a stop. "My name is Nora Patterson. Mrs. Henderson in town suggested I speak with you about a position." Caleb Peterson walked closer, his gaze direct but not unkind. "Mrs. Henderson sent you. What kind of position are you looking for?" Nora climbed down from the wagon with as much dignity as she could muster, aware of the dust on her dress and the wisps of dark hair escaping from her bun. "She mentioned you need help managing your household. I can cook, clean, keep books, and manage supplies. I was a teacher before I married, so I am educated and capable with figures." "You came out here for the teaching position," Caleb said, and it was not quite a question. "Heard they gave it to someone else." Heat crept up Nora's neck. They felt I was not suitable. Too old, they said. There was an edge to Caleb's voice that surprised her. School board is full of fools. Probably picked some girl barely out of the schoolroom herself who will giggle at the older boys and have no idea how to maintain discipline. That is not my concern anymore, Nora said, lifting her chin. I need work, Mr. Peterson, and I am very good at what I do. If you need references, I can provide them, though it may take some time to receive responses from St. Louis. Caleb studied her for a long moment, and Nora forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. She had learned long ago that showing weakness only invited people to take advantage, and despite her precarious position, she would not beg. Come inside, Caleb said finally. We can talk terms over coffee. Driver, you can wait if you want to take Mrs. Patterson back to town, or I can bring her back myself later. I will wait, the driver said, settling back on his seat. Got nowhere else to be this afternoon. The inside of the ranch house surprised Nora with its comfort and order, though she could see the signs of neglect in the dust on the mantelpiece and the stack of dirty dishes in the kitchen. The main room was spacious, with a large stone fireplace and furniture that looked handmade but well crafted. Books lined a shelf near the window, and Nora felt a little flutter of pleasure at the sight. A man who read was a man who thought. Caleb poured coffee from a pot on the stove, and Nora tried not to wince at how strong it looked. She accepted the cup with a murmur of thanks and took a careful sip, finding it surprisingly good despite its darkness. My sister Martha left 6 weeks ago, Caleb said, settling into a chair across from her. She had been living here since my wife died 4 years back, helping raise my daughter and keeping the house running. But our mother took ill, and Martha felt she had to go. I have been managing as best I can, but between the ranch work and everything else I am drowning. You have a daughter? Nora asked. How old is she? Emily just turned 8. She is a good girl, smart as a whip, but she needs proper care and attention. The ranch hands help keep an eye on her during the day, but that is not the same as having a woman around who can teach her the things she needs to know. Nora felt something loosen in her chest. A child who needed teaching, even if it was not in a formal schoolroom. I would be happy to help with her education, along with the household duties. The school board said you were too old, Caleb said bluntly. I am going to be honest with you, Mrs. Patterson. That sounds like exactly what I need. I do not want some young girl who will be more concerned with catching a husband than doing her job. I need someone stable, someone with experience in life who will not fall apart when things get difficult. Out here, life can be hard, and I need to know the person helping run my household can handle it. The relief that flooded through Nora was so intense she had to set down her coffee cup to hide the trembling of her hands. You are saying you want to hire me, if you are willing. The pay is $30 a month, plus room and board. You would have your own bedroom off the kitchen, private and comfortable. Sundays off if you want to go to town for church, or whatever else suits you. The work will not be easy, especially during roundup and branding season when we have extra hands to feed, but I do not expect you to do everything alone. I can hire someone from town to help with the heavy cleaning and laundry. $30 a month was more than fair, more than generous really. Nora knew women who worked for half that in much worse conditions. When would you want me to start? Is today too soon? Caleb asked, and there was a hint of humor in his voice that softened the hard lines of his face. I have been living on bad coffee and worse beans for weeks now, and Emily has been darning her own stockings with results I can only describe as creative. Despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty of the past few days, Nora found herself smiling. Today is perfect. Let me get my trunks from the wagon. Caleb insisted on hauling the trunks himself, and Nora watched the play of muscles under his shirt as he lifted them effortlessly. He was a handsome man, she realized with a start, in a rough-hewn, entirely masculine way that was very different from her late husband's refined features. The thought made her feel guilty and flustered, and she busied herself examining her new room to cover her confusion. The space was small but clean, with a real bed frame and mattress, a dresser with a mirror, and a window that looked out over the vegetable garden. Someone had embroidered curtains for the window, delicate work that spoke of care and patience. Martha's work, Nora guessed, and felt a pang for the woman who had left her home to care for an ailing mother. Emily is out with one of the hands, checking on a mare that is about to foal, Caleb said from the doorway. She should be back before supper. I should warn you, she has been running a bit wild without Martha here to keep her in line. She is not used to minding her manners anymore. I will manage, Nora said with more confidence than she felt. Children could be unpredictable, and a grieving child who had lost her mother and then her aunt might be especially difficult. But she had handled classrooms full of unruly students before her marriage. One 8-year-old girl could not be that much of a challenge. Famous last words, Nora thought later that evening when Emily Peterson burst through the door like a small tornado, all flying braids and dirty hands, and skidded to a stop at the sight of a stranger in her kitchen. Who are you? The girl demanded, her father's gray-blue eyes narrowing with suspicion. This is Mrs. Patterson, Caleb said, coming in behind his daughter. She is going to be helping around the house and with you. Mind your manners, Emily. I do not need help, Emily said, crossing her arms. I can take care of myself. Nora had seen this before, the defensive stance of a child who had learned not to trust too easily. She crouched down to Emily's level, ignoring the protest of her knees. I am sure you can, but your father needs help and I need a job, so perhaps we can help each other. What do you say? Emily studied her with the unnerving directness of the young. Are you going to leave like Aunt Martha did? Not if I can help it, Nora said honestly. I came a long way to get here and I plan to stay. You are old, Emily observed, and Caleb made a choking sound behind her. Emily, apologize right now. It is all right, Nora said, surprised to find she meant it. She is not wrong. I am older than many women in my position, but that means I have more experience and patience, which I think will serve us all well. Emily considered this, her head tilted to one side. Can you cook better than Pa? I certainly hope so, or we are all in trouble. That startled a laugh out of the girl, and some of the tension in the room eased. Caleb's shoulders relaxed, and when Nora glanced up at him, she caught an expression on his face that made her breath catch. Gratitude, yes, but something else too. Something that looked almost like relief, as though he had been holding his breath for weeks and could finally exhale. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Nora learned the rhythms of the ranch. She rose before dawn to start breakfast for Caleb and the hands who worked closest to the house, learning who liked their coffee, how and which men had sweet teeth that could be exploited with extra biscuits to ensure their cooperation. The kitchen became her domain, and she ruthlessly organized the pantry and root cellar, making lists of supplies that needed replenishing and noting what could be preserved from the garden before winter came. Emily watched her with cautious interest, neither helping nor hindering, testing the boundaries of this new arrangement. Nora did not push, simply went about her work and made conversation when the girl seemed inclined to listen. She learned that Emily loved horses more than anything, that her favorite color was green, that she still missed her mother with an ache that woke her crying some nights. Pa says Ma is in heaven, Emily confided one afternoon as they shelled peas together on the porch. But I do not understand why she had to go there. Why could she not stay here with us? Nora's hand stilled on the peas. When I lost my husband, I asked the same question. I think sometimes people we love have to leave, not because they want to, but because their bodies stop working the way they are supposed to. The love does not leave, though. That stays with us always. Did you love your husband a lot? I did. He was a good man, kind and smart. I still miss him sometimes, even though it has been 3 years. Emily absorbed this, her small fingers deftly splitting the pods. Pa loved Ma a lot too. He does not talk about her much anymore, but sometimes I catch him looking at her picture with sad eyes. The revelation made something twist in Nora's chest. She thought of Caleb as she had seen him that morning, coming in from the early chores with his hair damp from washing at the pump. The way he had smiled at her when she handed him his coffee, just the way he liked it. She had not expected to notice such things, had not expected to feel the flutter of awareness when his hand brushed hers as he took the cup. She was too old for such foolishness, Nora told herself firmly. She was here to work, to build a new life, not to develop feelings for her employer. That way lay nothing but trouble and heartache. But the heart, she was discovering, had very little respect for common sense. The weeks rolled into months, and autumn painted the prairie in shades of gold and russet. Nora found her place in the household, her routines becoming as natural as breathing. She managed the books with an efficiency that made Caleb whistle in appreciation when he saw how she had organized everything, tracking expenses and income with careful columns that showed exactly where the ranch stood financially. "You have a head for this," he said one evening, studying the ledger over her shoulder. He stood close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap and leather, feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Better than I ever did." "Numbers make sense," Nora said, trying to focus on the page instead of his proximity. "They follow rules and add up the way they are supposed to. There is comfort in that." "Not like people," Caleb said quietly, and when Nora looked up, she found him watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "No," she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not like people at all." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, and Nora felt the weight of all the things neither of them was saying. Then Emily called from her bedroom, asking for help with a knot in her bootlace, and the moment broke like a soap bubble. But after that, things felt different between them. Caleb found excuses to linger in the kitchen, while Nora cooked, discussing plans for the ranch, or asking her opinion on matters that had nothing to do with household management. She caught him watching her sometimes with a softness in his eyes that made her feel young and foolish and terrifyingly hopeful. The first snow came in late November, and with it came a crisis. One of the ranch hands rode in hard one afternoon, his horse lathered and his face grim. A section of the northern fence had come down in the wind, and cattle were wandering toward the open range where they could be lost or stolen. Caleb organized the hands immediately, calling for every available man to help round up the strays and repair the fence before dark. It would be dangerous work in the cold and fading light, but there was no choice. The cattle represented too much of the ranch's wealth to risk losing them. "I will have hot food ready when you return," Nora promised, already mentally cataloging what she could prepare quickly in large quantities. "And coffee strong enough to strip paint." Caleb paused in the doorway, his heavy coat already buttoned against the cold. "We might not be back until late. Do not wait up." "I will wait," Nora said firmly. "You will all need something warm when you come in half frozen." Something flickered in Caleb's eyes, and he crossed the room in 2 long strides. Before Nora quite knew what was happening, he had taken her hand in his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. For being here, for taking care of things, for taking care of us." I do not know what we would do without you anymore." Then he was gone, leaving Nora standing in the kitchen with her hand tingling and her heart racing. Emily, watching from the table where she was practicing her letters, said thoughtfully, "Pa likes you." "I like him too," Nora said, trying to sound normal despite the trembling in her voice. "He is a good employer." "That is not what I meant," Emily said with the devastating honesty of the young. "He likes you the way he used to like Ma. I can tell." Nora busied herself pulling out pots and supplies, not trusting herself to respond. What could she say? That she had noticed the same thing. That the feelings were mutual, growing stronger every day despite her best efforts to maintain professional distance. That she had started dreaming about a life that could never be hers, a future where she belonged here not as an employee but as something more. The men returned well after midnight, exhausted and half frozen but successful. They had found all but 3 head of cattle and repaired the fence well enough to hold, until they could do a more permanent job in better weather. Nora had stayed awake, keeping coffee hot and warming the stew she had prepared. The men ate gratefully, too tired for much conversation, and stumbled off to the bunkhouse for what remained of the night. Caleb was the last to leave, lingering after the others had gone. His face was drawn with exhaustion, his hands chapped and red from the cold despite his gloves. "You should get some sleep," Nora said gently. "Tomorrow will come soon enough." "I wanted to thank you properly," Caleb said, accepting the fresh cup of coffee she poured him. "You did not have to stay up, but I am glad you did. Coming back to a warm house and hot food, it made all the difference." "This is my job," Nora said, though they both knew it went beyond duty. "Nora." The way he said her name, soft and almost wondering, made her look up. When Mrs. Henderson first mentioned she might send someone out to inquire about the position, I expected a young woman, probably fresh from back east and completely unprepared for ranch life. Then you showed up, and I thought you might not be able to handle the work, that you might be too refined for the rough conditions out here. "You thought I was too old," Nora said, and there was no bitterness in her voice, only resignation. "No," Caleb said firmly. "I thought you might be too good for us. Too educated, too sophisticated to be content with cooking and cleaning and keeping house for a rough rancher and his wild daughter. But you proved me wrong in the best possible way. You are not too old for the school board, Nora." They were too foolish to see what they were passing up. And I know I have no right to say this, that you are my employee and I should not, but I cannot help feeling grateful every day that their loss was my gain. Nora's throat felt tight with emotion. "Caleb, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that you are appreciated here, that you are valued, that you are exactly the right age for me, for us, for this life." He set down his coffee cup and reached for her hand again, his touch deliberate this time, his eyes searching hers. "Tell me I am not alone in feeling this. Tell me you feel it too, this thing between us that has been growing all these months." "I feel it," Nora whispered, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he must hear it. "I have been trying not to, trying to be sensible and professional, but I feel it every time you walk into a room. Every time you smile at me or ask my opinion or look at me like I matter." "You do matter," Caleb said, and then his other hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "You matter more than I thought possible. I did not think I would ever feel this way again after Rachel died. I thought that part of my life was over, that I had had my chance at love and lost it. But then you came, with your dignity and your strength and your kind heart, and suddenly I am feeling things I never expected to feel again." "I am frightened," Nora admitted. "What if this is a mistake? What if I am too old, too set in my ways, too damaged by loss? Then we will be frightened together," Caleb said. "And we will figure it out as we go, the same way we figure out everything else. But Nora, I do not want to let this pass us by without at least trying. Life is too short and too hard to ignore something this good when it comes along." When he kissed her, gentle and questioning, Nora felt the last of her reservations melt away. His lips were warm despite the cold he had been working in, and he tasted of coffee and something uniquely himself. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally pulled apart, Caleb was smiling, and Nora realized she was smiling too, feeling young and giddy and utterly transformed. "We should probably discuss this when we are both less exhausted," Caleb said, though he made no move to step away. "But I want you to know my intentions are honorable. I am not looking for a casual affair or something temporary. I am too old for games, and I have Emily to think about." "What are you looking for?" Nora asked, though she thought she might know the answer. "A partner," Caleb said simply. "Someone to build a life with, to share the good times and the hard times. Someone who will love my daughter and work beside me to make this ranch prosper. Someone I can grow old with if she will have me." Tears pricked Nora's eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "That sounds like everything I want too." They stood together in the quiet kitchen, holding hands like young lovers, while outside the wind howled and the snow fell softly on the prairie. Nora thought about the twisting path that had brought her here, the disappointments and rejections that had seemed so crushing at the time. If the school board had not dismissed her as too old, she would never have come to the Peterson ranch. She would never have met Caleb and Emily, would never have found this place where she fit so perfectly. Sometimes, she realized, the doors that closed were blessings in disguise, leading you to the places you were always meant to be. Winter settled over the ranch in earnest after that night, bringing cold winds and heavy snows that kept everyone close to home. The change in Nora and Caleb's relationship was subtle but profound. They did not announce anything to Emily or the ranch hands, but the nature of their interactions shifted, becoming softer and more intimate. Caleb found reasons to touch Nora in passing, a hand on her shoulder or the small of her back. She packed special treats in his saddlebags when he had to ride out in the cold and sat up late with him going over the books, their heads bent close together in the lamplight. Emily noticed, of course. Children always did. But rather than being upset, she seemed delighted, watching them with a satisfaction that was almost comical in someone so young. "Are you going to marry Pa?" she asked Nora one day as they worked on her lessons at the kitchen table. Nora felt her cheeks heat. "What makes you think such a thing?" "He looks at you the way the stallion looks at the pretty mare in the far pasture," Emily said matter-of-factly. "All soft and interested. And you look at him the same way, especially when he is not watching." "You are too observant for your own good," Nora said, but she could not help smiling. "Your father and I care for each other, yes, but marriage is a big step that requires careful thought." "Ma would have liked you," Emily said suddenly, her expression turning serious. "She always said Pa needed someone strong who would not let him be too stubborn. Aunt Martha said Ma made her promise to make sure Pa did not end up alone, that he deserved to be happy again." The revelation touched Nora deeply. "I am honored you think your mother would have approved." "I know she would have, and I approve too, in case anyone is asking." Emily returned her attention to her slate, but not before Nora saw the small, hopeful smile on her face. Christmas came, and with it a cold snap that made going outdoors an ordeal. Nora had been carefully saving money from her wages, and she spent some of it on special treats for the holiday. She made dried apple pies and gingerbread, roasted a goose that one of the hands had shot, and created a feast that had everyone groaning with satisfaction. On Christmas morning, She gave Emily a new dress she had sewn in secret, working on it late at night after everyone else had gone to bed. The fabric was a deep green that brought out the color of the girl's eyes, with careful embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Emily's face lit up when she saw it, and she threw her arms around Nora's waist in a fierce hug that made Nora's throat tight with emotion. "It is the most beautiful dress I have ever seen," Emily declared. "Can I wear it to church next Sunday?" "It is yours to wear whenever you like," Nora said, smoothing the girl's hair. Caleb gave Nora a cameo brooch that had belonged to his grandmother, the delicate carving set in gold filigree. "I know it is not much," he said quietly, his fingers lingering on hers as he pressed the small box into her hand. "But it has been in my family for 3 generations, and I want you to have it." Nora understood what he was really saying, what the gift represented. Family heirlooms were not given lightly, especially to an employee. This was a promise, a declaration of intent that went beyond words. "It is perfect," she whispered, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "Thank you." That afternoon, while Emily was occupied showing her new dress to the ranch hands, Caleb took Nora's hand and led her out to the barn. It was warmer there, sheltered from the wind, with the horses huffing softly in their stalls and the smell of hay sweet in the air. "I have been thinking," Caleb said, pulling her close and wrapping his arms around her, "about what I want for the future for all of us. And I realize I have been going about this backward, worrying about propriety and taking things slow when what I really want is to make you a permanent part of this family." Nora's heart began to race. "Caleb, what are you saying?" "I am saying I love you, Nora Patterson. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you have made this house a home again. I love how you care for Emily like she is your own and how you look at me like I am something special. I love everything about you, and I do not want to spend another day without you knowing it." "I love you too," Nora said, the words spilling out in a rush. "I tried to be sensible, but I fell in love with you anyway, with your integrity and your dedication to your daughter and the way you treat everyone with respect. With your smile and your hands and the way you make me feel like I am exactly where I belong." "Then marry me," Caleb said, and it was not quite a question. "I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but we are not youngsters anymore. We know our own minds, know what we want from life. I want you as my wife, as Emily's mother, as my partner in all things. Say yes, Nora. Say you will marry me and make this family complete." "Yes," Nora said through her tears, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." When Caleb kissed her this time, it was with the freedom of an acknowledged claim, deep and passionate and full of promise. Nora kissed him back with everything she had, all the love and hope and joy she had been holding back pouring into that embrace. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell, but inside the barn, wrapped in Caleb's arms, Nora felt nothing but warmth. They told Emily that evening, and the girl's whoop of joy echoed through the house. She danced around the kitchen, pulling Nora into an impromptu waltz that ended with all 3 of them laughing and breathless. "Does this mean I can call you Ma?" Emily asked, suddenly shy. Nora knelt down and took the girl's hands in hers. "I would be honored if you called me Ma, but only if you want to. I'm not trying to replace your mother, Emily. She will always be your mother, always have a special place in your heart. But if you will let me, I would like to be a mother to you too. We can share the love, make room for both of us." "Ma would have liked that," Emily said, and threw her arms around Nora's neck. "I think she sent you to us, so Pa would not be sad anymore and I would have someone to teach me lady things." Over Emily's head, Nora met Caleb's eyes and saw them wet with tears. He mouthed, "Thank you," and Nora felt her heart swell with so much love she thought it might burst. They were married in late January on a clear, cold day when the sun sparkled on the snow and the sky was a brilliant blue. The ceremony took place in the small church in Trinity with Mrs. Henderson and half the town in attendance. Nora wore a dress of deep blue silk that Caleb had insisted on buying her, despite her protests about the expense. Emily stood beside her in her green Christmas dress, beaming with pride at her role as witness. The preacher's words washed over Nora like a benediction as she and Caleb exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for all their days. When Caleb slipped the simple gold band on her finger, his hand trembled slightly, and Nora felt her own tears spill over. She had never thought to have this again, this sense of belonging and completion. She had resigned herself to a life alone, to growing old on the margins of other people's families. But here she stood, being given a second chance at happiness with a man who valued her for exactly who she was. The wedding breakfast at the hotel was a joyous affair, with toasts and laughter and more food than anyone could eat. The townspeople who had dismissed Nora as too old for the teaching position came to offer congratulations, and if some of them looked shamefaced, Nora was gracious enough not to mention it. She was too happy to hold grudges, too full of joy to care about past slights. That night, back at the ranch that was now truly her home, Caleb carried her over the threshold like a bride despite her laughing protests that they were too old for such nonsense. "Speak for yourself," Caleb said, setting her down gently in their bedroom. "I feel younger than I have in years, and it is all because of you." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Nora felt the last barriers between them dissolve. They came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies with the reverence of people who understood how precious such gifts were. Caleb was patient and attentive, making sure of her pleasure before seeking his own, and afterward they lay tangled together in the darkness, talking in whispers about everything and nothing. "I never thought I would have this again," Caleb confessed, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "After Rachel died, I felt like half of me was gone. I went through the motions of living, but there was no joy in it. Then you came, and slowly, bit by bit, you brought me back to life." "You did the same for me," Nora said, pressing a kiss to his chest. "I was so lost when I came to Trinity, so convinced my life was essentially over. I thought I would spend my remaining years existing on the edges, useful but not vital to anyone. You showed me I was wrong. You made me feel valued and desired and cherished. You gave me a family and a purpose and a love I never dared hope for again." "You are exactly the right age for me," Caleb said, echoing the words he had spoken months ago. "Not too young, not too old. Just right, just perfect, just mine." "Yours," Nora agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. Spring came to the prairie in a rush of green growth and wildflowers, and with it came the busy season on the ranch. Caleb and the hands worked from dawn to dusk with the cattle, branding the new calves and moving the herd to fresh pasture. Nora managed the household with practiced efficiency, feeding everyone and keeping the books and making sure supplies were ordered and received on time. But she also found time for the small joys of her new life. She worked in the garden, coaxing vegetables from the rich soil. She taught Emily not just reading and arithmetic, but also sewing and cooking and all the practical skills a girl needed. She sat on the porch in the evenings with Caleb, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, his hand warm in hers as they planned for the future. In late spring, Nora realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she dismissed it as a sign of her age, the beginning of the change that came to all women eventually. But when the weeks passed and she began to feel queasy in the mornings, hope began to bloom in her chest alongside the fear. She was 39 years old, hardly a young woman. Having a baby at her age was risky, potentially dangerous. But oh, how she wanted it. She had always mourned the fact that she and her first husband had never had children, had assumed that door was forever closed to her. The thought that she might carry Caleb's child, might give Emily a sibling and build their family even larger, filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She waited until she was sure, until there could be no doubt, before telling Caleb. They were alone in the barn, checking on the mare Emily was so fond of when Nora found her courage. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice shaking only a little. "Something important." Caleb turned from the horse, his eyes immediately concerned. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am better than all right. I am pregnant, Caleb. We are going to have a baby." The look on his face would stay with Nora for the rest of her life. Shock gave way to disbelief, then to joy so pure and radiant it took her breath away. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around before setting her down gently, as though she were made of spun glass. "A baby," he said wonderingly, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "Nora, are you sure? This is not a mistake." "I am as sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. I know I am not young, Caleb. I know there are risks." "We will get you the best care possible," Caleb said firmly. "We will go to Wichita if we have to, find a doctor who specializes in such things. I will not take any chances with you, Nora. You are too precious to me." "Women have been having babies since the dawn of time," Nora said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I am strong and healthy. There is no reason to think anything will go wrong." But as her pregnancy progressed through the summer, Nora discovered that being pregnant at 39 was very different from what it might have been at 20. She tired more easily, and her back ached constantly. The summer heat made her swell and feel miserable, and there were moments when she wondered if her body was simply too old for this task. Caleb and Emily cared for her with devoted attention that was both touching and occasionally overwhelming. Caleb insisted she rest more, taking over tasks she had always done and hiring extra help despite her protests. Emily appointed herself assistant guardian, bringing Nora cool water and fanning her on the hot days, her young face serious with the weight of her responsibility. "You have to take care of yourself so the baby will be healthy," Emily informed her solemnly. "I am going to be a big sister, and I need you both to be all right." The doctor from Trinity came out to examine Nora in late summer and pronounced her surprisingly healthy for a woman her age expecting her first child. "You have good hips and strong constitution," he said, packing up his bag. "Barring complications, I see no reason you should not deliver safely. But you need to rest as much as possible in these last months. No heavy work, and call for me at the first sign of labor." Nora tried to follow his advice, but resting did not come naturally to her. She was used to being busy, to being useful, and sitting idle made her restless and irritable. Caleb finally solved the problem by bringing the ranch books to her, letting her work on the accounts from the comfort of the porch or the parlor. It kept her mind occupied while allowing her body to rest, and Nora was grateful for his understanding. As autumn painted the prairie in brilliant colors, Nora's body grew round and unwieldy. She could no longer hide her condition, and the townspeople who saw her at church or on her rare trips to Trinity reacted with a mix of surprise and judgment. A woman her age having a baby was unusual, and Nora could feel their stares and hear their whispers. But she held her head high, Caleb's arm strong and supportive at her side. Let them whisper. She and Caleb had created a life together out of love, and she refused to be ashamed of the blessing growing inside her. The baby came in early October on a bright, crisp day when the air smelled of wood smoke and falling leaves. Nora's labor started in the morning and progressed steadily through the day. The doctor arrived in the afternoon, summoned by one of the ranch hands, and set up in the bedroom with calm efficiency. Caleb stayed by Nora's side through it all, holding her hand and wiping her brow, whispering encouragement when the pain became nearly unbearable. Nora drew strength from his presence, from the love in his eyes and the faith he had in her ability to bring their child safely into the world. The birth was hard, harder than Nora had expected, and there were moments when she feared she might not have the strength to finish what her body had started. But just when she thought she could not go on, when the pain seemed too great to bear, she heard the doctor say, "One more push, Mrs. Peterson. Your baby is almost here." With a final effort that drew on reserves she had not known she possessed, Nora pushed, and suddenly the pain receded and was replaced by the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. A baby's first cry, strong and lusty and full of life. "You have a son," the doctor announced, laying the squalling infant on Nora's chest. "A big, healthy boy." Through her tears, Nora looked down at her son, at the miracle she had created with Caleb. He was red-faced and furious at his abrupt entrance into the world, his tiny fists waving and his eyes screwed shut. But to Nora, he was the most perfect thing she had ever seen. "Hello, little one," she whispered, her fingers gently touching his soft cheek. "Welcome to the world." Caleb was crying openly, his arm around Nora and his free hand reaching tentatively to touch his son. "He is perfect," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Nora, you are amazing. I love you so much." "I love you too," Nora said, exhausted but happier than she had ever been in her life. "We made this, Caleb. We made a family." Emily was allowed in once the doctor had finished his work and Nora was settled comfortably with the baby. The girl approached slowly, her eyes wide with wonder as she looked at her new brother. "He is so small," she said softly. "Can I touch him?" "Of course you can. He is your brother, Emily. He is going to need you to help look after him and teach him things." Emily's face lit up with pride and responsibility. She gently touched the baby's hand, and his tiny fingers immediately closed around hers. "Hello, brother," she said. "I am your big sister Emily, and I am going to make sure nothing bad ever happens to you." They named him Charles after Caleb's father, and from the beginning, he was a joy. He was a good baby, sleeping well and eating heartily, growing stronger and more alert with each passing day. Nora recovered from the birth more slowly than she would have liked, her body taking time to heal from the ordeal. But with Caleb and Emily's help, she managed, and by the time winter came again, she felt almost like her old self. Watching Caleb with their son filled Nora with a contentment she had never known before. He was a devoted father, patient and loving, spending every free moment with Charles. He changed diapers without complaint and walked the floor with the baby when he fussed, singing old cowboy songs in a voice that was more enthusiasm than talent, but seemed to soothe Charles nonetheless. Emily was equally devoted, taking her role as big sister seriously. She helped with the baby whenever she could, learning to hold him properly and rock him to sleep. She talked to him constantly, telling him about the ranch and the horses and all the adventures they would have together when he was bigger. The years that followed were the happiest of Nora's life. The ranch prospered under their joint management, Caleb handling the cattle and land while Nora managed the finances and household with growing confidence and skill. They expanded the herd, bought more land, and became one of the most successful operations in the county. Charles grew into a sturdy, curious boy who followed his father everywhere and drove his mother to distraction with his adventurous spirit. Emily blossomed into a lovely young woman, confident and capable, with her father's eyes and her mother's determination. She showed no interest in leaving the ranch, content to learn the business alongside her father and help Nora with Charles and the household. When Charles was 3, Nora discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise that shocked and delighted them all. At 42, she was even older than she had been with Charles, and the pregnancy was harder on her body. But she came through it safely, delivering a daughter they named Catherine after Nora's mother. The little girl had Nora's dark hair and Caleb's eyes, a perfect blend of both her parents. As their children grew, Caleb and Nora grew together as well, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered droughts and hard winters, cattle diseases, and the occasional conflict with neighbors or rustlers. But through it all, they remained partners in the truest sense, supporting each other and working together to build the life they wanted. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caleb took Nora back to the barn where he had first proposed, now somewhat renovated and expanded to accommodate their growing operation. "You remember?" he asked, pulling her close in the same spot where they had stood all those years ago. "Do you remember how scared we both were, how uncertain about the future?" "I remember," Nora said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I remember thinking I was too old for love, too old for the life I really wanted, and then you told me I was exactly the right age for you. You were. You are. You will always be." Caleb tilted her chin up so he could see her face, now marked with the lines of laughter and years but still beautiful to him. "You gave me back my life, Nora. You gave me love and family and happiness I never thought I would have again. You are my partner, my love, my everything." "And you are mine," Nora said, tears pricking her eyes as they always did when Caleb said such things. "You saw me when the rest of the world looked past me. You valued me when others dismissed me. You loved me exactly as I was, age and all." "Best decision I ever made," Caleb said, and kissed her with the passion and tenderness of a love that had only grown stronger with time. They walked back to the house hand in hand, past the garden that flourished under Nora's care and the corrals where their horses grazed peacefully. Through the window, they could see Emily helping Charles with his arithmetic, while Catherine played with wooden blocks on the floor. It was a scene of domestic tranquility that filled Nora's heart to bursting. This was the life that had almost passed her by. If she had been younger, prettier, more fashionable, the school board might have hired her, and she would have spent her days teaching other people's children instead of raising her own. She would never have met Caleb, never known the joy of being loved so completely, never experienced the profound satisfaction of building something meaningful with a true partner. The rejection that had seemed so devastating at the time had actually been the greatest gift. It had led her exactly where she was meant to be, to the people she was meant to love, to the life she was meant to live. As the years continued to pass, Nora and Caleb watched their children grow into remarkable people. Emily eventually married one of the neighboring rancher's sons, a good man who respected her intelligence and capability. They built their own ranch nearby, and Nora delighted in becoming a grandmother when Emily had her first child. Charles developed his father's talent with cattle and his mother's head for business. By the time he was 20, he was running much of the ranch's day-to-day operations, allowing Caleb to slow down a bit and spend more time with Nora and Catherine. Catherine proved to be the family scholar, always with her nose in a book and asking questions that challenged even Nora's educated background. When she was old enough, she insisted on going to the newly established normal school to become a teacher, determined to give children the education they deserved regardless of their circumstances or location. "She gets that from you," Caleb told Nora proudly as they helped Catherine pack for her journey to school. "That passion for learning and teaching, that belief that everyone deserves a chance." "Perhaps," Nora said, smoothing her daughter's hair. But her courage and determination, those come from you. As Nora entered her 50s and then her 60s, she remained active on the ranch, though she gradually handed over more responsibilities to the younger generation. She and Caleb became the patriarch and matriarch not just of their own family, but of the whole community, respected for their fair dealing and known for their willingness to help neighbors in need. The school board that had once rejected Nora as too old eventually asked her to join them, recognizing her wisdom and experience. She accepted, determined to ensure that no one else would be dismissed simply because of their age. Under her influence, the schools in the area flourished, attracting good teachers and providing quality education to children who might otherwise have had none. On Nora's 65th birthday, the family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. All 3 children were there with their own families now, filling the house with noise and laughter. Grandchildren raced through the rooms, and the dinner table had to be extended with boards and sawhorses to accommodate everyone. After the meal, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Caleb took Nora's hand and led her out to the porch. They sat in the rocking chairs he had made for their 20th anniversary, looking out over the land they had built together. "You have any regrets?" Caleb asked quietly. "Any wishes for a different life?" Nora thought about the question seriously, reviewing the path that had brought her here. The loss of her first husband, the rejection by the school board, the uncertainty and fear of starting over in a new place. All the struggles and challenges, the hard work and occasional heartbreak. "Not a single one," she said finally, squeezing his hand. "Every step, even the painful ones, led me exactly where I needed to be. I would not change anything, because changing anything might mean not having this, not having you and our children and the life we built together." "Even being dismissed as too old," Caleb teased gently. "Especially that," Nora said with a smile. "Because it brought me to a man who said I was exactly the right age for him. And he was exactly right." They sat together as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, their hands clasped and their hearts full. Inside, their family laughed and talked, carrying on the legacy of love and partnership that Nora and Caleb had created. The ranch that had given Nora a chance when no one else would now thrived under multiple generations. A testament to what could be built when people were valued for their wisdom and experience rather than dismissed for their age. As the prairie wind whispered through the grass and the coyotes began their evening song, Nora reflected on the unexpected gift that had come from rejection. She had been told she was too old, past her usefulness, no longer valuable to society. But Caleb had seen the truth that others missed. That experience and maturity were not liabilities but assets. That a woman of a certain age had much to offer if only someone was wise enough to appreciate it. Their love story was not the fairy tale of youth, full of naive passion and unrealistic expectations. It was something better, a mature love built on mutual respect, shared values, and the deep understanding that comes from having lived long enough to know what truly matters. They had found each other not in the bloom of youth but in the richness of middle age, and their love had only grown stronger with each passing year. Caleb raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, his eyes meeting hers in the gathering darkness. No words were needed. After so many years together, they could communicate volumes with a look, a touch, a smile. Inside, someone started playing the piano, and the sound of singing drifted out through the open windows. Charles was teaching one of the grandchildren to dance, his patience and gentleness a mirror of his father's. Emily was helping with the cleanup, organizing the younger ones with practiced efficiency. Catherine was in deep conversation with her husband about educational reforms, her passion for teaching as strong as ever. This was their legacy, Nora thought with satisfaction. Not just the ranch and the land, though those would pass to future generations, but the values they had instilled in their children. Hard work and integrity, compassion and fairness, the belief that every person had worth regardless of their age or circumstances. As they finally rose to go inside, back to the warmth and love of their family, Caleb pulled Nora close one more time. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair, "for taking a chance on a rough rancher and his wild daughter. For seeing past the dirt and the hard work to the life we could build together. For being brave enough to start over when others told you your best days were behind you." "Thank you," Nora whispered back, "for seeing me when I felt invisible, for valuing me when others dismissed me, for loving me exactly as I was and helping me become even more than I imagined I could be." They walked into the house together, into the light and warmth and love that filled every corner. This was home. This was family. This was the life that neither of them had expected but both had built with determination and devotion. The years continued to roll by, bringing changes and challenges but never diminishing the love that had grown between them. When Caleb finally passed away at the age of 81, it was peacefully in his sleep with Nora beside him, her hand in his as it had been for over 30 years of marriage. She grieved him deeply, but with the knowledge that they had made the most of every day together, that nothing had been left unsaid or undone. Nora lived another 5 years after Caleb's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, still attending school board meetings and offering advice to young teachers starting their careers. She told her story often, encouraging other women to believe that it was never too late for love, never too late for a new beginning, never too late to become exactly who you were meant to be. On a warm spring morning, much like the one when she had first arrived in Trinity all those years ago, Nora passed away quietly in the house she had made a home. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her, holding her hands and whispering their love and gratitude for all she had given them. At her funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives she had touched, students she had taught, families she had helped, neighbors she had befriended. The preacher spoke of her faith and her strength, but it was Charles who gave the eulogy that truly captured who his mother had been. "My mother came to Trinity thinking her life was essentially over," he said, his voice steady despite his tears. "She had been told she was too old, past her usefulness, no longer valuable, but my father saw the truth that others missed. He saw a woman of strength and wisdom, of compassion and capability. He saw someone who was not too old, but exactly the right age for the life they would build together. She taught us that age is not a measure of worth, that experience is valuable, that it is never too late to start over and build something beautiful. She showed us that rejection can be redirection, that closed doors often lead to better opportunities, that the love we find later in life can be every bit as passionate and profound as young love, perhaps even more so because it is tempered with wisdom and understanding. She was our mother, our teacher, our example of grace and resilience. She was proof that the best years of your life can come when you least expect them, that love can find you even when you think you are past such things, that being dismissed as too old is sometimes the greatest gift of all if it leads you to where you truly belong. As they laid Nora to rest beside Caleb in the small cemetery overlooking the prairie they both had loved, her family stood together, linked by the love she and Caleb had created. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the promise of spring renewal. And if anyone had been listening carefully, They might have heard in that wind the echo of a woman's laughter, joyful and free, celebrating a life well lived, and a love that had transcended all expectations and limitations. The ranch continued to thrive under Charles' management, and eventually passed to his children and then to theirs. But more than the land and the cattle, what endured was the story of Caleb and Nora, told and retold to each new generation. It became a family legend, a reminder that love knows no age limit, that worth is not determined by youth, and that sometimes the best things in life come to those who are brave enough to start over when everything seems lost. Years later, when Catherine's granddaughter was struggling with her own journey, feeling too old at 35 to start the business she dreamed of, the family gathered to share Nora's story once again. They told of the woman who had been dismissed as too old for a teaching position, and found instead a love that transformed her life. They spoke of the rancher who had the wisdom to recognize that experience and maturity were gifts, not liabilities. They passed down the words that had become the family motto: "You are exactly the right age for the life you are meant to live." And in that way, the love story of Caleb and Nora continued to inspire and encourage, a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever been told they were too old, too late, too past their prime. Their legacy was not just in the land or the wealth they had accumulated, but in the enduring truth they had lived. That real love sees value where others see age, finds beauty in maturity, and recognizes that the right person at the right time can make any age exactly perfect. The sun set over the prairie as it had for countless years, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The grass rippled in the eternal wind, and the cattle lowed in the distance. In the house that Nora had made a home, new generations lived and loved and built their own stories. But the foundation remained the same: love, respect, partnership, and the belief that no one is ever too old to begin again, to find joy, to discover that their best days might still lie ahead. This was the gift Nora and Caleb had given not just to their own family, but to everyone who heard their story. In a world that often dismissed those who had lived and loved and accumulated wisdom through experience, they stood as proof that maturity had its own beauty, its own strength, its own passionate love story waiting to be written. And for anyone brave enough to believe it, any age could be exactly the right age for the life and love they deserved.